is raining down on Gaza, the graveyard for children, with thousands of innocent women, children, and men bearing the brunt of Israel's monstrous aggression since October 7. They depict perhaps only 10% of the reality, which is certainly unimaginably worse.
This is a tragedy which has actually been going on for over a century, ever since the project of providing a homeland for the European Jews on land which belonged to another people. And as Gandhi said, about Western civilization, it's a great idea. In other words, it has no real reality, particularly for non-white peoples, where European colonialism and neocolonialism have prevailed in this crime of all crimes. And the crime is the crime of genocide. And genocide, as described in the trials after the Second World War, is the one crime which encompasses all the other crimes against humanity. The US, which vetoes everything that pertains to Israel and which is inconvenient to Israel, whereas the other permanent members are less automatic.
Assalamu alaikum and hello. I am Faryal and you're watching New Wave Global. It's been 38 days and 75 years since it all started. Hell is raining down on Gaza, the graveyard for children, with thousands of innocent women, children, and men bearing the brunt of Israel's monstrous aggression since October 7. Soul-crushing images of devastation and faces of the survivors speak of the horrors endured by a trapped population within the living nightmare that is Gaza. Images and footages that we see on the social media are a throwback to the dark ages, yet they depict perhaps only 10% of the reality, which is certainly unimaginably worse. The non-stop suffering, the intensity of multiple pains, the mental trauma, all of this cannot be captured or communicated. Also, images on the social media manage to show only as much as the social media rules allow. While the camera cannot be everywhere, neither every strike, every act of barbarism can be recorded, nor the slow, suffocating death of thousands still lying buried under the rubble can ever be known or shown to the world. Palestinians have been completely dehumanized, referred to as human animals by Israel's defense minister, which is most shameful. And as an animal lover, I think for one, it angered me a lot. The brutalities that Palestinians are enduring are certainly not deserved by animals or any other form of living being. I'm very honored to welcome here with me Mr. Ashraf Jahangir Qazi, Pakistan's eminent diplomat, former ambassador to the US, Syria, Russia, and China, former High Commissioner to India. He also served as the head of the UN mission and special representative of the United Nations Secretary General in Iraq and Sudan. He also held diplomatic assignments in Copenhagen, Tokyo, Cairo, and London. Mr. Qazi, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor, a great pleasure, and thank you for that very great introduction, to the whole problem and tragedy of Gaza and Palestine.
Indeed. So for the civilized world to allow this man-made apocalypse to unfold, it sort of tantamounts to a total collapse of civilization and civil rights. The medieval sites are something that one doesn't expect in this time and age, especially to be tolerated, in fact, encouraged by the enlightened West that talks of humanity and human rights and democracy and freedoms. Now, the UN has repeatedly declared that Israeli violence against the Palestinians is collective punishment and flouts international humanitarian laws. But the US and its Western allies dub Israel's carpet bombing as its right to self-defense. Clearly, the UN Security Council has failed in its duty to stop these hostilities. It's a world body whose primary responsibility is to maintain international peace and security. Now, you, as someone who has been associated with the UN, What is your understanding of the United Nations failure to enable a ceasefire in Gaza?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to say that the tragedy that we are all witnessing in Gaza is even worse than what your very graphic picture depicts. This is a tragedy which has actually been going on for over a century, ever since the project of providing a homeland for the European Jews on land which belonged to another people. That project began in the late 19th century. So it's over 100 years. And what has been happening since the creation of the State of Israel to the Palestinians in general and the inhabitants of Gaza in particular has been described by Ilan Pape as incremental genocide. And I would say that ever since 1967, this incremental genocide has actually become a case of accelerated genocide. And what is happening there means that we really can't think in terms of European civilization. European civilization, European democracy, or American civilization and democracy are really for their own people. They are far more defined by their racist attitudes. Now, maybe all of us are to some degree or the other racist, and all human beings have certain limitations, so all kinds of epithets might apply. But in the case of Europe, which and Western civilization, and as Gandhi said, about Western civilization, it's a great idea. In other words, it has no real reality, particularly for non-white peoples, where European colonialism and neocolonialism have prevailed. And what we are seeing now in Gaza is the worst thing is Israel, no matter how dark the colors in which we paint it, pales in comparison to its prime supporter. That is the United States of America, which prides itself on being the moral center of the political universe today, comparing itself with all its rivals in moralistic terms, as if it's self-evident that it is far more superior in terms of democracy, in terms of human values and civilizational values and all. But the US is knowingly supporting Israel in this crime of all crimes. And the crime is the crime of genocide. And genocide, as was described in the trials after the Second World War, is the one crime which encompasses all the other crimes against humanity. It is the single biggest crime that human civilization can perpetuate. And there have been cases of that before. It's not the only case. There is a genocide convention which defines what genocide is. But the prime example of genocide today are two, there are more than one, but I will mention, of course, Palestine, which is an ongoing tragedy, and we're all concerned with it. But there's Kashmir also. Absolutely, and there are other cases which I won't go into, but there are other cases. But Palestine, because of along with Kashmir, over a century, because the Kashmir tragedy began also over a century ago, even if the genocidal process is of more recent origin. In Palestine, the post-World War II situation with the creation of the State of Israel means that it's and particularly since 1967, as far as Gaza is concerned, now that means how many years? That's 70 years almost of genocide. So, and what is the world doing? You have America on the one hand showing concern for the human rights situation in Palestine, while militarily supporting Israel's commission of the crime of genocide. I think America's responsibility, America's criminality is of a far greater scale than that even of Israel, whose criminality is almost beyond words to describe. And The world press, even the Pakistani press, is full of what is happening. So to go into great detail as to what is happening to the children, what's happening to the hospitals, what's happening with regard to food, medicines, doctors. In fact, one of the hospitals, Al-Ahli Hospital, I was listening today on the internet, its ICU unit, which was manned by half a dozen brave souls. Every one of them is dead today. So
sorry
children who are,
to be cutting you short here, but so
yes.
that means that United Nations is helpless because it has not even been able to.
Well, let me just come to the United Nations and just try and put in a word for it.
Okay.
The United Nations is all of us. The United Nations is the international community. The Secretary General carries out the orders of the Security Council. The Security Council is controlled by the veto-wielding powers, the 5 veto-wielding powers, and in particular the US, which vetoes everything that that pertains to Israel and which is inconvenient to Israel, whereas the other permanent members are less automatic. But when it comes to a difficult situation like this, the Western members, that's the UK and France, they fall in line very quickly behind the United States. Otherwise, China and Russia, the other 2 permanent members, are completely siding with the Palestinians here. So it is the Security Council and the which controls what the UN does. It has all the power. The UN General Assembly reflects world opinion, but it doesn't have any mandatory powers. Its resolutions are moral resolutions. They actually constitute part of international law. That's true, but in reality, no country is committed to use force to implement their resolutions if they're violated, which is not the case with the UN Security Council. If the UN Security Council resolutions are not implemented, then the United Nations, the Secretary General can call upon the Security Council to consider the matter and even consider the question of using force in support of the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions. So the UN security is what the UN Secretary General carries out the orders of the UN security and is responsible for administration itself. So the failure is the political failure. Otherwise, in the field of human rights and so many other agencies of the UN, a lot of very good work is being done, and the UN is an admirable organization that way. Politically, because of its structure and because of the veto-wielding power of the supreme member of the United Nations, it is paralyzed.
All right, so coming to the role of the Muslim world, at the recently concluded OIC Arab League Summit, only the expected happened. The high and the mighty of the Muslim world, their standing armies, with their trillions of dollars and with their all-strong economic clouds, they could not agree upon a course of action that would pressure Israel and its powerful allies to stop the massacre of Palestinians. They couldn't decide upon any economic sanctions as well. No, there were no game-changing decisions. Little diplomatic activism was seen at the UN as well. If all that was needed were strongly worded statements, perhaps the Palestine issue would have been solved decades ago. Pakistan's interim PM also condemned and pledged support at the summit, but again, that's just offering lip service to whatever's going on. What do you think can Pakistan do beyond mere condemnation to be able to cause at least a dent to what is going on? We know we are not in too strong a position, but do you think there's anything that we can do to sort of make a difference, no matter how?
Well, I'd like to sort of refer to a comment by the great British commentator George Galloway, talking about the Muslim get-together. And he sarcastically observed that the only thing missing at the OIC summit, or the Arab Muslim summit as they call it, was the belly dancing, because they had absolutely no intention of agreeing on anything effective. Of course, there were countries which wanted some concrete action, but the vast majority, led by the hosts and all, wanted to play for the gallery without doing anything in particular. And the reason is very obvious. The reason is that by and large, with some notable and noble exceptions and all. By and large, the Muslim and Arab leadership is completely dependent on the West, and what for their security. Security against whom? Security, by and large, against their own people. Because if you look at the opinion polls in each one of these Muslim countries, including the host country, the overwhelming majority of the people are completely on the side of the Palestinians and usually upset by the attitude of their governments. But because these are not democracies and these are authoritarian regimes who are dependent on the West for security against their own public opinion and against their own people. Therefore, they have to play to the gallery while doing nothing. They couldn't even agree on a minimal program of action which had been proposed. No oil sanctions, no cancellation of overflights, over their territories by Israel, leave alone the United States, Israel, which is committing genocide on a daily basis. They didn't want to take any action, and basically these are the countries which have initiated the Abrahamic Accords for a normalization with Israel, and at the most they're going to have a pause, a humanitarian pause, should I say, in the process of normalization with Israel until the waters cool down, or the atmosphere sort of cools down, and they can resume their treachery against their own people by pursuing their relationship with Israel. I think it's one of the most disgraceful performances. Whereas America is primarily responsible for supporting it, we as Muslims ought to be thoroughly ashamed of ourselves for being hand in glove with Israel and the United States against the Palestinian people. I will say something for Pakistan, though, and our Prime Minister did recommend that Israel be brought before the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and be charged for crimes against humanity. I think that was absent from most, exception of the other so-called radical Muslim states, confrontational states, etc. They give them all kinds of names and all. They are in favor of this, but amongst the others, particularly the very close friends of Pakistan and the Mohsen and those who help Pakistan and are seen to be great friends, etc., and not taking names because they're only too obvious, they would have nothing like any kind of bringing of Israel to accountability before any institution like the ICC. And America has promised to bomb The Hague if it ever if ever any American soldier were brought before the ICC. And American soldiers are right now, through intelligence and through military supplies, and probably through their presence in Israel, are helping the genocidal process against the Palestinians. And quite rightfully, they could be brought before, except that America said if even one of them is brought, they would actually bomb The Hague, which is the headquarters of the ICC. So we're in this kind of absolutely absurd. It's the theater of the absurd, except that it is so devilishly evil, satanic, that words fail me in describing it. It's very, very difficult to keep one's cool when describing the plight of the Palestinians, of the US, and the shame of our own people, our own governments.
It's very difficult to find the words. You're so right there. What about Qatar's role as a regional mediator? It has been widely discussed. It has been host to some of Hamas's exile leadership. It already is hosting. Some of them are living there. And there was this meeting with Israel's Mossad intelligence service and CIA director and the Qatari prime minister recently. They all met in Doha to discuss the parameters of a deal. Do you think there's a possibility that Qatar, together with maybe Turkey, because President Erdogan has also suggested to his Iranian counterpart that they can assume a guarantor role to resolve the crisis in Gaza? Do you think there's a possibility that the two of them can...
Well, let me sort of, within limits, praise the role of Qatar and some other Arab countries who do want to get humanitarian supplies, which are urgently needed. No matter what the tragedy and how indignant we are, we must at all times try and keep those children alive who are still alive. Those who have been martyred are in heaven. But those who are still alive, it is our duty to do whatever is possible, and Qatar is playing a very constructive role there, and so full marks to it there. But the broader picture still remains pretty much the same, because all of them want to now assist the victims of the genocide without even considering what to do to prevent such a thing from being repeated. And you know very well that Israel has been launching these kinds of invasions every 3 or 4 years. This is the 6th or 7th invasion of Gaza, and in between each invasion, on a daily basis, the genocidal process is implemented. If you look at the size of Gaza and the population of Gaza, it's 25 kilometers by 5 kilometers. The length is from Islamabad to Pindi and back to Islamabad. The breadth, it's from where I'm staying in F61 to Dichok would be the breadth of Gaza. And you have 2.3 million people living there, and half of them are being forcibly evacuated from Gaza city into half of what is left of Gaza. So you can imagine, it is the density of Gaza's population was already twice that of Tokyo City. It's going to be twice what it is today. So barely keeping them alive, which is what the whole strategy is. Have genocide, keep them alive, keep weeping crocodile tears for them, but do nothing to resolve the problem. Why? Because the security of our various elites depends on those who are backing Israel, not 100%, but 200%. So it's one of those. If it weren't true, I don't think any fiction writer could even come up with such a tragedy.
Yeah. So, talking of US complicity, which you are just mentioning repeatedly,
yes.
We know that is unmistakable. But the public opinion in the US is at sharp variance with Biden administration stance. You must have gone through the data for progress polling results, which showed that 66% of American voters support a ceasefire in Gaza. Another New York Times survey this week showed that Biden is losing ground with young voters in the US over his handling of the Gaza invasion by Israel, prompting concern among Democrats. Now, is there a chance that Biden might rein in his support for Israel to assist his re-election while seeking a second term in office?
Absolutely zero. There is no chance at all of that happening. Of course, all this talk about being upset by the human rights situation, even Biden goes on record saying this. Even Sunak in the UK keeps on saying this. All the guys who support Israel 200% keep saying this. But when it comes, it's an election year, and you talk about 66% of the youth, but the vast majority are in favor of relieving the distress of the Palestinians, or the tragic distress of them and their children and all. But what is the degree of support for Israel defending itself against the so-called terrorist Hamas? That is close to 100%, 90%. Now, there are a lot of young people, a lot of intellectuals, a lot of other people who have reservations and all. But if you look at the support for Israel's right to self-defense. I mean, I'm almost being sarcastic, but this is the language being used. The right to eliminate Hamas, which is as a terrorist organization, designated by whom as a terrorist organization. There is no difference between the people of Gaza and Hamas itself. They are the people of Hamas, and they have been ever since 1967. When Hamas won after 67, then later on in 80, when they won the elections in 2006, when they won the elections there, what did Hamas do after winning the elections? Hamas, it immediately offered negotiations with Israel for a two-state solution. It showed that it was in favor of a peace with which the Palestinians could live, even though it would still be a very, very unfair peace, based on the Oslo Accords, which were completely in favor of Israel against the Palestinians, because Arafat trusted the Palestinians and the US and was let down. So Hamas, after winning the 2006 elections, and what was the reaction of the US and Israel? To impose an absolutely brutal blockade on them and to spit on any sort of chance of talking with Hamas, whom they regarded as criminal merely because of their resistance on behalf of their own children to the Israeli genocidal process. So it is totally absurd to believe that Biden has got any feelings for these are political things. Even the American public opinion, they're human beings, they're civilized people. They want to see their government trying to help people in distress. So politicians are aware of this and answer to that need whilst continuing to support Israel in its genocide against the Palestinians, as I said, 200%. Sounds like a contradiction, sounds like a macabre kind of fiction, but that is the reality.
Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah movement, which is a key ally of Hamas and part of the axis of resistance in the region, has said that regional war is a realistic possibility while issuing warnings to Israel and the US. What do you think are the chances of this conflict spreading out and exploding into a regional conflagration? We already see spike in cross-border hostilities with Lebanon.
Hezbollah does not want a wider war. Hamas does not want to provoke a wider war. Iran does not want a wider war. Russia and China do not want a wider war. The United States and Israel don't give a damn. They think they can take on everyone. And they see, and as far as America is concerned, what is happening in Gaza and the so-called elimination of Hamas is directed in large part, ultimately, at Iran. It is just like when the attack in Iraq took place against Saddam Hussein. The ultimate target was not Saddam Hussein, it was Iran. So similarly today, the ultimate target of the US assisted genocide in Palestine is aimed at isolating Iran, exposing Iran, embarrassing Iran as being useless for the Arabs and for the Palestinians, etc. So there is that. Now Iran doesn't want a wider war, Hezbollah doesn't want it, Hamas doesn't want it, all the others do want it. But if the genocide of the Palestinians continues, then sooner or later, maybe not immediately, but sooner or later, this war will spread, because there's a limit to how much Hezbollah will be able to restrain itself if it sees its brethren in Gaza being wiped out through a genocidal process without its taking any action. So almost certainly it has made it absolutely clear, and all the leaders of the world know, that Hezbollah has no intentions of widening the war, but they at the same time will do everything possible to prevent the completion of the genocide of the Gazans. And the genocide is also going to be taking place in stages and all. Eliminate them from Gaza City, then eliminate them from the Gaza Strip, then push them into Egypt, into the Sinai, where the second or third Nakba can take place, catastrophe and all, and ultimately make it into an Egypt versus Palestinian sort of situation. So it is as cynical as you can possibly make it. And there is no doubt about it. Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas see no advantage in spreading this war. Hamas has launched its attack on October the 7th because they were driven mad by a deliberate plan to make them mad, confined in a small space, put on starvation diet, no medicines, no humanitarian assistance, no freedom, generations born, growing up and dying inside that open air prison, that concentration camp, which was actually now being referred to as a death camp, which is what it is. And the death camp were the Nazi camps. Who are the modern children of the Nazis? Who are the modern? They are the Israelis and their supporters.
Absolutely.
And are the children and the grandchildren of the victims of the Nazi Holocaust. They are the Gazans. They are the Palestinians. That is the truth. People may not like it, but I will look them in the eye and say it 100 times over and over again.
Absolutely. So Craig Mockiber, who just resigned from his position as the director of the New York office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, he resigned with a widely circulated resignation letter. He's a very experienced human rights advocate. In his view, a single democratic secular state should be established in all of Palestine with equal rights for Christian, Muslims, Jews. And his reasoning for this is that this will put an end to settler colonialism and apartheid. Do you agree with what he says, or do you think that the traditional two-state solution in accordance with UN resolutions is the only solution to the Palestine issue?
First of all, Craig Mockiber defined the situation in Gaza as a textbook case of genocide. And he is a very senior international lawyer, the Human Rights Commission. So here's an expert, one of many. Now, as far as 242 is concerned, the original resolution of the UN General Assembly, which was based on a very unfair division, because 6% of the population with the Jews were given 56% of the land, and the rest were given 44%. I mean, that was as unfair as it was and all. And as I've told you, Arafat had sought a peaceful resolution, and similarly Hamas had. And the two-state solution is actually a unfair compromise. The fairest solution is the UN General Assembly resolution of 1947-181, which is a one-state solution based on democratic cooperation between the Jews and the Arabs. The Jews had come in, the Arabs had recognized that as a reality. The Brits had already done their perfidy through the Balfour Declaration and setting up, facilitating the Israelis and sort of expiating their guilt, with regard to World War II, along with the Americans, and of course following their Christian Zionist principles, which were actually very anti-Semitic, but based on the Old Testament and its brutal sort of passages. So 181 was the ideal solution, which the Arabs had accepted, which some of the original settlers in Israel were also looking forward to. But the Zionist settlers who came in after World War II had no such thing. They were not even religious Jews. These were secular nationalists, and they were and their beliefs were in total contradiction with the teachings of Judaism through the Middle Ages, through the centuries and all, which had said, after the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, there should never be a state of Israel, even on uninhabited land. The Jews were forbidden to create a state. So the program to create the state of Israel as a military outpost of the global hegemonistic plans of America had nothing to do with the Judean religion. It had everything to do with the tribal nationalism of the Jews, which was in essence anti-Semitic, nothing more anti-Semitic than that. So 181, if it were at all possible to revive that, which it appears to be impossible, and that is why people like Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein say that is the best solution if it were possible. But today that seems impossible, so the two-state solution is the best imperfect solution available, but neither the Americans nor the Israelis ever had any intention of implementing the two-state resolution, despite their pretenses to the contrary. That remains the case.
Yeah, that does remain the case. I think there's a lot of everything is so messed up in the sense that
it's a totally deliberately zero-sum game. That's the way the Israelis want it. That's the way the Americans want it. And anything which is a positive sum game, which can benefit both parties, is something which Israel rejects outrightly, with the complete support of the United States, along with its intelligence and military assistance. So America is the primary guilty party. Israel is merely a puppet. Were America ever to decide, which it seems impossible right now, that Israel should get out? What happened in 1956 when they invaded the Sinai and came up to the Suez? Eisenhower said, "Get out." And the Israelis got out within a week.
Yeah.
So if America, but ever since 1967, America has decided that Israel is its military outpost and treats Israel as part of continental United States or part of mainland United States, and certainly an integral part of its global strategy for global hegemony.
Very right. So one thing from what you are saying and from what, of course, we are observing is quite evident that this, and it's evident from this unforgivable horror which is being brought upon Gaza, that for the world's ruling elite, the Western as well as the Muslim governments, the corporate leadership, concerns of geopolitics and corporate capitalism and imperialist interests certainly supersede humanity and the value of human lives. In Noam Chomsky's words, Palestinians have no international support for a good reason. They don't have wealth, they don't have power, so they don't have any rights. It's the way the world works, unfortunately.
But we don't have to accept it. And even Noam Chomsky says, you're absolutely right in describing the way he sort of analyzes what the state of the world is.
That is the reality, but we don't have to accept it, like you're saying.
If you accept it, then you know who are the first people you are betraying? The very first people you are betraying, if you accept this, you're betraying your own children, your own grandchildren. Because climate change cannot ever be addressed in a world as divided as it is today. It can never. And every year, the doomsday clock is several seconds closer to midnight. The last one was 90 seconds. This time after Gaza, I can almost take a bet with anyone that will be something closer to 70 seconds or maybe just a minute away from midnight. And midnight means the end of the world when everything blows up. So climate change, just like genocide, is something which encompasses all the other challenges of the world. Some of those challenges may be more immediate than climate change, because climate change will destroy the world within this century. But as the Yellow Vests of France, the Labour says that we worry about the middle of the month, not the middle of the century. You know, their salary is not being able to get them through the month. And developing countries like Pakistan, our poor people, we can't even get through the first week of the month, you know, before they have to sort of go into debt in order to feed their families for the rest of the month. So there are challenges which are even more urgent than climate change, but climate change is going to end human organization, human civilization. The human race may survive as some kind of wild beast, after the 21st century. But unless climate change is addressed, the human civilization will not survive in any organized form. And the United States is leading the way, not only through its corporate capitalist order, which sort of maximum profits are the morally the most sacred goal it goes for, which means and capitalism is lethal to any long-term project of climate control or controlling climate. In fact, what's it called? Climate warming or something, but it's actually climate heating, because every report is worse than the previous one. So there are so many challenges, and in today's world, divided as we are by issues like Palestine, which are so graphic and so, and like Kashmir, which doesn't receive a tenth of the publicity or 100th of the publicity, but in nature and in quality is not far off the Palestinian issue. And there are other tragics. Unless these are addressed, there is no way we are going to be able to look at our own children and grandchildren and their children in the eye, and they, in their last moments, are going to be cursing us for having left them the kind of world in which they will just burn and die. And nauzu billah, inshallah ye nahi hoga, lekin agar ye nahi hoga, ye Allah ki taraf se ek rahmat hogi, lekin not because of our actions to save them.
Absolutely. Mr. Qazi, I'm very grateful to you for your valuable input and your time. Wrapping up with a prayer for Palestine. Allah Hafiz and goodbye.